Nothing like a bit of apocalyptic to get your blood going. The apocalyptic, like the bit of reading that Leanne just offered to us, express a sense of upheaval and danger in the world. Wars, earthquakes, plagues, famines, people set against each other. What could possibly be good in any of that? It would seem that this is all part and parcel of the emergence of truth. Because when the whole of culture is held together by a fundamental, I'm going to use a French word, méconnaissance, which is a misrecognition. So you see something, but you don't see it for what it really is, you think it's something else. So if culture is held by that kind of thing, the unveiling of that deception cannot help but create ripples across the entirety of the world's cultures. I've touched on this theme with you before. I think it's really difficult for us to imagine just how devastating it would be for the first century Jew to contemplate the destruction of their temple. It represented the throne of God on the earth, the very place wherein heaven touched the earth. It symbolised God's majesty, authority, and power. And not only those very important things, the temple was also central to the economy of Jerusalem. People from all over Israel made their pilgrimage to the temple in Jerusalem several times a year for the most significant festivals and holy days. Sidebar, of course, I want to tell you that a holy day used to be just that. A holiday is a holy day when you'd go and travel. You get the day off work so you could travel and do your worship and that kind of thing. It wasn't always about Bali or a cruise on the Pacific. And interestingly, it's probably the Christians' influence that secularised holy days into holidays, because even though that sounds like it's less holy now, Christians believe that the whole earth is the Lord's and everything in it, and in every day and in every way we are being called to worship and to live in response to the grace and love we have received. So this is a deep challenge to us as disciples, and the truth really is that the whole earth is the Lord's, and we are called to live worship-filled lives in response to Jesus' love and grace and truth. But our broken humanity responds more easily, and I would say more superficially, to ancient patterns of specified rituals in set-apart places on designated days. So while disciples might know about worshipping God in every way, in every place, our humanity as a whole has drifted from doing that. The broader community, liberated from these cultural forms that we are more familiar with, has drifted to far less life-sustaining patterns and alternative authorities, it would seem to me. So even though Christians, by their love and awareness of God in everything, that's supposed to propel us to worship in everything, it's also had a side effect which has made everything, or the culture, a bit less able to find God except in special places. It's a strange kind of thing. Let me see if I can explain that to you in a less confusing way. Have you ever made a mistake of buying cheap shoes? We did in Taiwan a couple of years back. Bought some shoes for Pei. She needed a pair of shoes and there was just the right ones, and we bought them. They were very cheap. And they lasted just long enough to get home because they were glued together with very cheap glue. And when cheap glue loses its tackiness, it just lets go. And these shoes just started peeling off and falling apart, and they really all came very unstuck. That's a little bit like what happens in our culture. When the glue that once bound us and held us together is by increments being dissolved or evaporating. Not simply the patterns of community gathering together, at specific events and celebrations, but more so the shared beliefs regarding ultimate truth and what virtue looks like, and how we nurture the health and well-being of the whole of our community and not simply facilitate the freedom of the individual. The thoughtful among us are waking up to this challenge more and more. Left to our own devices, and I say that both figuratively and now actually quite literally, we begin to form sub-cliques within the whole. We begin to jostle and compete with each other. Without a genuinely embracing and unifying narrative capable of appropriately respecting and holding and challenging all of us, we have to devolve to the use of coercion to enforce ever more restrictive laws in the attempt to contain the tumult that's brewing within us. Jesus was not making a prediction when he said nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be great earthquakes and in various places, plagues and famines, and there will be terrors and great signs in the heavens. He was describing the way humanity has always been. The disciples responded by asking in fear, "When, Lord? When will these things happen?" The more aware question would have been, "When, Lord? When will we stop doing life like this?" I guess it's fair enough that ancient peasants might not have been fully aware that Jesus was describing human history in the way we have always simply assumed it works, the way we think it has to be almost. After all, the best we can tell, it seems to have been that from the very beginning of time, since the foundation of the world. We've always been jostling with each other. There's always been wars. We're always up against each other. It's irretrievably of the nature of things, infighting and jealousy and factionalism and tumult and upheaval and blame. It's a story of humanity. As things begin to become more obviously unstuck in certain ways, all sorts of leaders and prophets emerge to harness the distress of people and the fear of the population. They point to what is no longer working as well as it used to, but rather than identifying an effective way to improve the situation, they simply identify who is at fault. Blame offers a dual advantage for the said leader or prophet because it's a lot easier than actually improving things, and it channels group fear and anger in an emotionally satisfying way. And Jesus warns us not to be taken in by these charlatans. Their single trick is to create division, claiming life can only improve for us if it gets decidedly worse for a particular set of others. And this is quite literally the oldest trick in the book. We see Adam pull it on Eve after they both ate the forbidden fruit, which exposed an aspect of themselves neither of them wanted to see. If we were to hitch our wagon to one of these latter-day leaders or prophets, we should be ready for unprecedented violence to ensue. As soon as we pit one against another, we should expect violence. It creates a scenario of fight or die. And given that binary choice, most of us will discover we have a fight instinct ready to hand, and we will fight either for dominance or at least for survival. Look at today, look around the world, look at people you know, and consider the sweep of human history and wonder. There has never been a time we know of where we have been free from conflicts and war. As soon as we claim they are the problem, we set up a conflict that is only resolvable when one side triumphs over the other and the other is either dominated or expelled. And this deeply ingrained pattern of blame is kind of endemic to the human way of being. It even looks like it might be the source code of the original forms of religious sacrifice. We instinctively identify who can be blamed for the plague in the community, and then we will expel that one or that small group we have deemed to be responsible. The remainder of the community is strengthened in their solidarity as a consequence by their unanimous agreement together in the expelling of that selected victim. It's a remarkably self-affirming process, because it appears to actually work quite efficiently and effectively to restore the community's sense of solidarity and well-being, but only for a time and at a terrible cost. A mechanism that produces a period of peace and seeming security can be construed as better than not having any mechanism at all, even if it comes at the cost of a somewhat arbitrary victim or group of victims. And even though it does not address the root cause of the conflict and threat, if it appears to achieve some form of peace for a time, good enough. That is, until the mechanism is rendered less and less effective. Like Pei's shoes when the glue came unstuck and they just fell apart. They just become bits of shoe. The reality is we can now see through this victim-blaming mechanism, even as we might experience the emotional satisfaction it produces, we're also aware that it's not true. The reality is always far more nuanced and complex. It's far more difficult to assess, and our own behaviours and desires are implicated in the more closely we observe what's actually going on. We see actually we behave in ways that aren't so crash hot all the time. It's easy to be persuaded by the simple and the direct, as long as it's not us who are the target of the blame. And I can tell you this from my own limited experience, there's nothing more distressing than realising you have become the target of a powerful group that have decided you would make a suitable sacrifice. These days, part of us knows this victim-blaming mechanism does not account for what is actually going on. And as a result, the process has diminished power to achieve the unanimity that is really its most effective thing. And without that unanimity, it becomes less and less effective at restoring even a temporary peace. The very legitimacy of the mechanism itself comes into question. And then we are left with no mechanism at all to quell the chaos and restore the order that is foundational to our human flourishing. And with the loss of a viable mechanism to restore this solidarity, community itself begins to break down. The sense of security that we can enjoy when we know our neighbours are looking out for us is wonderful. But it gives way to a growing sense of insecurity that undermines our trust in others when we no longer feel that we are together. It easily becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. We fear others are not with us, and so we begin to prioritise looking after ourselves first and have less regard for what others might need. And soon others around us learn to do the same, and we get drawn into a bit of a spiral of suspicion, each for themselves and against the others. It's a story of families, of siblings, of tribes, of ethnic groups, and of nations. Define who is us, oppose the others who are them, prioritise yourself and your own first, protect what you fear might be taken from you. It's so easy to forego the benefits of cooperation because trust is hard won over time, but easily lost in a single betrayal. And once we become frightened and feel life is about fending for ourselves, there is never enough of anything. Fear entertains countless contingencies that can never be adequately attended to. That's the nature of fear. For example, how much superannuation is enough? It's a good question, isn't it? Have you got enough superannuation? I love those ads. Have you got enough superannuation? The only answer to that is always no. Because it depends. It depends on the kind of lifestyle you want. It depends what inflation turns out to be like. I thought I had this much, but now everything costs that much, and what I have isn't worth much anymore. It depends what proves to be most important to you. And the nature of your friendships and family relationships come into this as well. It depends on the level of social supports around you and access to local amenities. And most especially, it depends on community cohesion and how much local neighbours care for one another. When I think about superannuation, the more astute question is, how am I going to continue to invest all I am and all I have in serving the living God who loves me and who is love? Because I'm not sure if I'm going to have enough saved up to go on an overseas trip. I hope to, but I may not. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to afford to put a toilet in the upstairs of our house so that we can use the bedroom up there as we get old and doddery. Maybe. I'm not sure if I'm going to have enough money to keep buying quality single malts to drink into my dotage. That one really worries me. Thank you, Simon. But I know I will always have enough to serve the living God, who loves me and who is love. If that is my first priority and my heart's desire, no matter what I have or who it turn out to be, I will always be and have everything I need. The upshot of the systems of our world is that the genuinely vulnerable do get targeted. It is the most efficient way to maintain social order and stability in a world that's always at risk of drifting into chaos. And by vulnerable here, I don't mean those who have learnt how to weaponise the language of victimhood, and I'm not talking about those who wield their supposed vulnerability as a bit of a cudgel of guilt against others. I'm sure we all know people who do that. The truly vulnerable are those who are denied any voice at all, the ones who are forced to carry the burden of society's suffering by the decisions of the powerful. And to be perfectly honest, in recent history in the Western world, we tend to have offshored that to other nations who grew our cash crops or took on the role of our dirty factories, or more recently became our detention centres. It's by no means fair, but it has worked rather well for us. But the system is not holding as it once did, and chaos is not so effectively being constrained. We are beginning to realise the upheaval is not simply all around us, it's also within us as well. We are in fact all vulnerable. Any of us could be targeted. And the fearful response to this is to make sure you're with those who are doing the targeting and thereby ensure you never become the target. But the faithful response is to expose the whole damn system for what it is, with its deception, and then call one another to appropriate account, which often involves becoming the obviously innocent victim of what is thereby shown to be a corrupt system, which is exactly what Jesus did. So if you want to be among those who follow Jesus, you need to be ready for what that is likely to entail. Often it means not choosing a side in a particular conflict, and people on either side of the conflict will then likely turn against you simply because you're not on their side. Jesus said, "Blessed are you when men hate you and ostracize you." In the reading we had this morning, all men will hate you. People get offended and feel threatened when you fail to side with them against their perceived enemy. The survival-driven binary thinking kicks in, and as Jesus also said in another place, "He who is not with me is against me." And if we seek to walk as Jesus walked, then we should anticipate people will react to us in a manner similar to the way people reacted to Jesus. We should quite literally expect that we might find ourselves before the authorities, being called upon to give a defense for the hope that is within us. And Jesus tells us something difficult here. He says, prepare to be unprepared to defend yourself. Which is not the concern that it might all happen so quickly in a moment that you don't expect that you are caught unaware. It is the deliberate cultivation of a disposition that is not oriented towards self-defense, but instead is focused on sharing truth and love and the wisdom of God. This is most effectively shared in the form of personal conviction. A prepared set of talking points simply won't cut it, because it can never adequately convey the life-changing reorientation of the heart that results from a living faith in Christ. And also, we've entered a time when clever arguments or polished presentations or PR strategies or spin doctoring or social media influencing are everywhere. And as a consequence, they're diminishing in their currency. We now know how clever people can be at passing themselves off in ways that everyone else seems to like. And at the same time, there is a growing appetite for genuine authenticity. Authenticity, even when it is blatantly corrupt and self-dealing, which is a really strange thing. It's become more attractive than performative virtue signalling, as it were. Have you ever seen the cartoon? It's a big billboard and there's two sheep looking up at it. The billboard's got a face of a wolf on it. And a caption over the top says, "I will eat you." And one sheep turns to the other and says, "I really like his honesty." And it feels like we're in a time like that, where the authenticity is the most important thing, even if they're being completely authentic about what they're going to do to bring you harm. And the apocalypse is the unmasking of what is, the revealing of what's actually going on, the exposing of the heart. Cultural norms and polite protocols give way to uncensored expressions of genuine desire, and pretense is regarded with the suspicion it has always deserved. We find ourselves longing to be connected with genuinely, thoroughly, authentically good people. And that means people who regard others with love and respect, are ready to admit their own shortcomings, and are moving in the direction of integrity and faithfulness. In short, we are hungry to connect with those who are genuinely pursuing the way of Jesus. That's what being a disciple is about. The upheaval is coming. Actually, it's been coming and ongoing for 2,000 years already. And in the midst of the upheaval, truth is becoming evident. Those who are only playing at virtue are exposed as superficial. People of good heart are revealed as good-hearted. Those who look to Jesus as Lord and Saviour become signposts to the only one who can lead us to life. The apocalypse is the uncovering, the revealing. Light has been shone where once there was only méconnaissance, misrecognition, and we are the witnesses of this eternal truth. The truth of the kingdom that is not thrown down when the stones of the temple are thrown down. May we be found faithful and true witnesses to Christ, to the glory of God. Amen.